Today I'm bringing you a dual-screen Android device with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, the Thor handheld console from AYN, the same company that made the Odin 2 series. After a few days with it, I want to share its pros and cons, especially how it performs with 3DS and NDS game emulation, how it holds up in important areas for a handheld like portability and battery life, and for when you don't need a dual screen, what the experience is like in single screen mode. If you find this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Let's see if this small dual screen high performance Thor handheld console can truly become the new console. Boasts a dual screen clamshell design much like the 3DS, weighing in at 365 grams. Given its intention to emulate the 3DS, a comparison with the complete original DS handheld series is essential. This includes the inaugural NDS, NDS Lite, NDS-i, NDS LL, and the first compact 3DS model. 3DS, the original large one, the flat 2DS, the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL, and the new 2DS XL. For thickness, let's compare it to the new 3DS and the new 3DS XL. For a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 Android handheld with a 6000 mAh battery and active cooling, I personally think the Thor's size and weight are pretty well controlled. What do you all think? Plus, the clamshell form factor itself is very pocketable and portable, so I'm quite satisfied with the Thor's portability. Now for the handheld itself. The top and bottom shells are made of a matte plastic material. Honestly, it looks average, but it's scratch resistant and durable, and fingerprints aren't obvious, so it's practical. Open it up, and the top screen is a 6-inch 16:9 1080p screen with a 120Hz refresh rate. The bottom screen is 3.9 and 2-inch screen 1240 by 1080 pixels with a 31:27 aspect ratio, which is almost 8:7. Both screens utilize AMOLED technology, allowing for synchronized brightness adjustments with virtually no color discrepancies. Next, we'll examine the flicker of the top and bottom screens as brightness is adjusted. However, it's important to remember that the bottom screen is limited to 60 Hz, if the top screen's high. Activating a high refresh rate may cause screen tearing on the bottom screen. I recommend using only the top screen for high refresh rate users like game streaming. Next, on the C side are the joysticks and buttons. Because it's a clamshell, the joysticks are recessed and feature an RGB light ring. The D-pad is an 8-directional dome switch with no ghosting. The ABXY buttons use conductive rubber and a Nintendo layout, which is great especially for a dual-screen clamshell primarily for DS emulation. It obviously makes more sense for the button layout to match the 3DS. Above are the two S buttons, below are the Android home and back buttons along with the left and right speakers. The shoulder buttons are a bit noisy when triggered. The linear triggers support linear input, and the raised part allows your middle finger to brace against it. For a handheld with a flat back and no grip design, this is a very effective way to distribute weight and relieve discomfort during long holding periods. The device's back has air intake and exhaust vents with the AYN logo. Below on each side are lanyard holes, volume controls, the power button, a full Type-C port, a 3.5mm jack and a TF card slot. Build-wise, shell seams are good, but the hinge is uneven on the left and right. When closed, the top screen contacts the C side via two concentrated rubber pads. This feels too focused as the left and right sides. The sides lack support. First, this large gap detracts from its appearance, and second, applying slight pressure can depress both sides, causing concern for potential damage to the top screen. A surrounding bezel would significantly improve this. I'm curious if a protective case could resolve this issue. Alright, let's move on to game testing. Given it's a dual-screen clamshell, 3DS games are a must-play, and the Monster Hunter series is naturally the top pick. I'm thrilled. This unit has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor with 12GB RAM and 256GB storage. Using the Citra emulator, set the screen layout to large screen and the secondary to bottom screen for correct dual screen display. All games are set to 4x resolution with 60fps. Starting with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, performance isn't a concern. With AYN's performance mode, it runs at full speed almost constantly. Underwater scenes render fine. Power consumption is 7 to 8 watts, and an hour of continuous play uses 20% battery. That translates to a battery life of about 4 hours. Now let's compare its performance with Monster Hunter 4 on a new 3DS XL. As for the screen ratio, the Thor handheld console's top screen is 16:9 and the bottom is 8:7, which doesn't quite match the 3DS's 15:9 top and 4:3 bottom screens. But it's not too different, and the black frame blends with the screen's black bars, so it doesn't feel out of place at all. The top screen is slightly larger than the new 3DS XL's, while the bottom screen is a bit smaller, but I didn't plan on using touch controls anyway. The hinge has a 3-stage opening angle just like the new 3DS XL, corresponding to roughly 120, 150 and 180 degrees. Overall, the Thor handheld console has done a great job of replicating the 3DS form factor, and the experience of playing hunting games on it is one of the most authentic among handhelds. Next is Monster Hunter Generations. Performance is similarly fine, running at near full frames and full speed, even fighting glaveness. But observant viewers may have noticed rendering artifacts on the bottom screen when running Monster Hunter Generations with Vulkan. If you switch to OpenGL, performance is too low. Normally the solution would be to use the Citra MMJ emulator, but perhaps due to the Thor handheld console's dual screen implementation differs from other handhelds. With Citra MMJ in dual screen mode, touch input is inverted, meaning the bottom screen is unresponsive. You need to tap the corresponding area on the top screen. We'll likely need to await an emulator developer's fix. It's truly unfortunate that a handheld so faithful to the 3DS hardware can't properly support Citra MMJ. The NDS situation is similar, the drastic. The emulator can display on dual screens, but the touch input is inverted, similar to Citra, which means you can only use the NDS emulator. Given that 3DS games run without any performance issues, NDS emulation is naturally effortless. You can play them directly at 5x resolution. Regarding the handheld's physical form, when we compare it to an NDS LL, the primary difference observed is the size of the upper and lower screens. This doesn't make a difference for most games. However, for games like Contra, which have linked top and bottom screens, or Ninja Gaiden, which features a page-turning style, you'll need to manually adjust the top screen in the emulator settings to match the size of the bottom screen. This way you can achieve a symmetrical display just like on an actual NDS console. Although this will result in extremely large black borders on the top screen, it offers a more authentic experience. Actually, besides 3DS and NDS, there's also the less common dual-screen Wii U. The newest Android CMU supports split-screen emulation, so for instance, in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the health, map, and item bars can go on the bottom, leaving the top screen clean. But the Wii U gamepad is 16:9, unlike the 3DS and NDS's 4:3 bottom screens, on the Thor's 8:7 bottom. Displaying a 16:9 image on the screen results in truly enormous black bars, which does affect the viewing experience somewhat. We've seen several dual-screen platforms, but we can't just play those few games on a dual-screen handheld, right? So next up is single-screen game emulation testing. Let's start with PSP. The Thor handheld console's software logic is that an app launches on the screen where you click it in the main menu, so for a 16:9 and PSP emulator it should naturally be launched from the top screen. As for performance, Monster Hunter runs at a full 60 frames per second with 3 to 4x resolution, and the whole device consumes just over 3 watts. The idle secondary screen can be used as a monitoring front end or turned off completely to save more power and extend battery life. Of course, you can also open another app, like a guide or to watch videos, which is a nice change of pace for repetitive games. The front end has two very useful features here. One is focus lock. Normally, if you use the bottom screen's controls, the focus shifts to the bottom screen's app, and you can't control the emulator anymore. But after locking the focus on the top screen, no matter what you do on the bottom screen, the controller will still control the game on the top screen. The second is separate brightness and volume controls, allowing you to independently adjust each screen's display brightness and media volume. You can independently shrink it or mute it. For retro platforms like FC and GB, playing on the 8:7 bottom screen offers a better experience. The top screen then becomes idle, and you can choose to turn it off or watch my videos, hee. Next, for the more demanding PS2, God of War runs at a full 60 frames per second at 2.5x resolution. There's no need to worry about the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2's performance. The opening scene. The device consumes about 9 watts here, definitely a demanding game. Moving on to the Switch, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate runs smoothly in docked mode with a 60 FPS patch without issues. This game, which had rendering bugs, actually performs much better when run with Yuzu. Then Tears of the Kingdom, also with a 60 FPS patch, almost maintains a stable 60 FPS at the start, but once you reach the initial Sky Island, the frame rate drops significantly. It fluctuates between 30 and 50 plus frames per second and may crash after prolonged play. Setting the resolution to 0.75x can mitigate this. Overall, it's playable. The ultimate performance test for Android handhelds is Windows emulation. We tested Monster Hunter World, using the method from my previous video's pinned comment on the Thor handheld with its Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 at 10 watts. Monster Hunter World, Iceborne can reach over 40 frames per second in Celiana at the lowest settings and 720p resolution. In large maps like the Guiding Lands, it gets 30 frames per second and above. It's surprisingly playable. Under high light, the heat on the Thor is concentrated near the rear exhaust vent and the upper right corner of the bottom screen. You don't feel it during normal grip, but it's quite hot when you need to use the touchscreen. The overall cooling strategy leans towards low noise, so I hope they add a manual fan speed control feature. So that concludes the showcase of the Thor handheld console, the comparison with dual screen platforms like the 3DS, and the test of its maximum emulation performance. What do you think of this handheld? I have a very positive impression, mainly because its form factor is a great throwback to clamshell dual screen handhelds like the 3DS, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2's performance. And its compatibility among Android handhelds is quite good. While its price might seem a bit high after the recent handheld price wars, it's actually very cost effective when compared horizontally with other dual screen handhelds. Of course, I can't speak for the 865 version, but its weight and size are very well controlled. Plus, the clamshell design makes it incredibly pocketable and portable. As for its issues, well, the aesthetics are just average, and when closed. The large seam is noticeable, but that's a minor issue. For me, the biggest disappointment is that they built the dual-screen hardware, but it cannot be used properly. While Citra and Drastic emulators, as well as Citra Enhanced and NDS, are mostly sufficient, just like the rendering errors we saw in Monster Hunter XX on Citra Enhanced, different emulators have their own strengths. The fact that the Thor can only use half of these emulators is a real shame. I wonder if AYN has any plans to help improve emulator support, especially for Citra. That would really take the Thor's practical value to the next level. Finally, let's wrap up with some buying advice. First, you obviously need to have a use for dual screens, whether it's for intensive 3DS and NDS emulation, or for watching videos while you game. You have to be able to use both screens, otherwise you're better off buying a single screen device. And although the dual screen setup on the Thor is relatively idiot-proof, there's still a bit more of a learning curve compared to single screen devices. The Citra Enhanced and NDS emulators also require some setup, not a lot, but you need to be willing to tinker a bit. As for whether to choose the Thor or a real 3DS, that's not something that can be explained in a few words. You can wait for my comparison video or just ask me directly with your specific needs. Okay, so that's all for this video. If you liked it, please like, subscribe and share.